Marcus Aurelius Meditations. So I was introduced by reading another piece of material about Stoicism and the Stoic philosophies. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on all that. They seem to be more introverted and focus on only things they can control and not worrying about outside impressions of what other people think of them and um, trying to get people to do certain things when they don't want to. It's more of a reflective inner thought process, I guess, where you're your own person and you're part of a community, but ultimately you're responsible for yourself. I guess I'm trying to surmise it the best way I can. But what's weird is this is basically sounds like he's out in the middle of nowhere and he's just writing things he's thinking about. And it sounds like he's kind of depressed, actually, because a lot of these, probably 10% at least of the thoughts in this book are related to death and, what it means to him and other people, not worrying about what happens to you because we all have to go through it kind of thing. Um, a lot of it was about people that are upset with you and basically don't worry about it, who gives a crap kind of attitude. And the critics I read from critics of Stoicism basically say that it's too easy to wash your hands of everybody else and just kind of the heck with all y'all. But that's for each person to decide whether that's a viable philosophical lifestyle or not. I'm going to comment more on the book than the philosophy. So the book looks pretty thick, right? And I'm also reading some old English literature that's about the same length as this. So it has a lot of notes at the end. You get to the end of the book, okay, you think it's about 250 pages, but there's an index of names at the end. There's a general index, there's notes. And then when you flap back, because I was surprised when I got to the end of the book, I hit the notes section and I was barely past 100 pages. It was like 122 pages and I was done. It's got a fairly lengthy introduction. And the reason that there's so many notes is because he, in a lot of these, I don't know what you call them, stanzas or whatever, he's talking about other people at the time. So perhaps a current day reader might need all these notes at the end, but I don't believe an average reader is going to read 100+ pages of notes. They might, but I'm going to go into the ideas that I have and how you can read this. So it's not a book per se. Like I said, it's more like inspirational quotes. So you see online every once in a while a statement that a person has made and their name at the end, and you go, okay, that's pretty good. And you read it and you think about it for a second and then you're done. And you see many of these in your lifetime, and there's probably only a handful that you're going to memorize and make part of your personal creed. And this book, is literally full of those. And so in that 100 pages, there's those kind of quotes, and then there's more lengthy, like paragraphs on an idea, and then expanding upon that idea. The problem with it is if you are trying to read like I normally do 20, 30, 40 pages a day, after a while it becomes a big blur. So it's not like reading a book. It's like I said, I'm reading this other old English thing, and I can read 40, 50 pages in a row of that, and it's got a story in it, so you can roll along with it. Well, it's like, man, I can't really absorb all these all at once. There's too many of them. So truly, this is the kind of document that if you have a home library, you could include this, and then perhaps you need to read this very slowly, where you're just going to read a couple of stanzas at a time for the day and then put it away. I don't think that it's an effective reading tool to go through it from beginning to end like I did in a matter of 3 days, because now I'm done with it and I'm going to put it aside. I guess that's okay if you decide that you're so impressed with this guy's philosophies that you want to dig into more of his writings, because there are other writings. He is an emperor, and you could read on how he managed his kingdom and things of that sort in the other book, and things that he wrote. This one is just the philosophical things. So there were a few of these quotes that were like, hey, that's pretty good. And then there's a lot of repetition. Some of the ideas in it you saw several times popping up, where I'm sure if you're just sitting out in the middle of nowhere writing, you're going to kind of repeat the same ideas you have. And he does that. He talks about time being a river and how, some fish might be pulled under and not come back up earlier than other ones, talking about, some people not living long and other people going farther downstream, but basically the river is eventually going to take everyone under. And that comes up several times, which, is kind of, it's accurate, but bleak. It's not something you necessarily want to read about. And then there's like these, I'm just trying to find one at random here. No thief can steal your will. There's a real short one. I tend to like the shorter excerpts better. But if this was like an album, let's say if this was like an album, then you might pick a song or two out of the album that are your favorites. If this was somebody's collection of albums, then you might say, okay, this particular chapter is like the best record they did out of their career. And it is, I'm not trying to understate this. It's an important document because a lot of statesmen and thinkers have used his philosophies as base points for their own understanding and expanding of their life strategies. So I'm not underselling his importance. It is an important document. It's quite old, but it's not really a book. So I would advise that if you could read this in very small tidbits over a long period of time, then it's probably going to do you more good than if you read it from front to back 112 pages in a matter of a few days like I did. Now, that said, it could be an exposure to it, and then you put it aside and start some other things that are in a similar realm. And I did that at the purchase of this. I also got Seneca, Letters from a Stoic. So it's going to be interesting to see how this lines up with this book, because Seneca and Marcus Aurelius are two of the main authors of the idea of Stoicism, is what I've read. So that would be another perhaps thing you might want to look at. And then in addition to that, I purchased the Basic Works of Aristotle, which is a very big book. Now I will contrast this. I've read other philosophical stuff before. So Aristotle taught Plato, and I read several of the Plato books, and I enjoyed those a lot more than this. But this, in a certain arena of Stoicism and self-reflection, I guess, is very good. So I'll comment on the other book that I'm reading about, which is Old Tales from Wales, and I can't remember the title of it, but it's not it's not Canterbury Tales, which I also have up here, but it's something similar like that. It's got some Tales of Rhiannon, which is a famous song from Fleetwood Mac, and then it's got some Arthurian stories in there. I didn't really like the Arthurian story, a lot of killing, which is typical for very old literature. But as far as this goes, good document, maybe not so much good book, but a reference, I would say, and maybe a starting point for other material. Still worthwhile.